She probably knows.
Ladies and gentlemen, are there any matters that we need to take up before we bring jurors?
Your Honor, we just instruct the jury about, I guess, that we're taking Mr. Staten out of order.
I will.
Thank you.
Yes. Good lunch recess. We are taking a witness out of order. In other words, Ms. Suhall will be back on the stand after this witness is completed, just to accommodate some scheduling issues. So they're going to hear from this witness, then we'll have Ms. Suhall come back and we'll resume with direct examination of her. So, Mr. Lively?
Yes, Your Honor. The state will call Carl Edward Staten.
Sir, if you would, place your left hand on the Bible and raise your right. Do you solemnly swear the testimony you give to be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Thank you.
Mr. Lively?
Thank you, Your Honor. Good afternoon, sir. If you wouldn't mind just introducing yourself to the jury.
My name's Carl Edward Staten,
Okay. And Mr. Staten, where do you live?
6800 Nightdale Eagle Rock Road.
All right. That's here in Wake County?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir. How long have you lived there?
Well, I lived in that house 11 years.
Okay. Have you always lived in Wake County before that, though?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, Mr. Staten, thank you for being here. I just need to ask you a few questions about the night of April 10th of 2014. You remember that night?
I don't remember the date, but I remember the night.
You remember what happened that you're here to talk
yeah.
about?
Uh-huh.
Okay. Mr. Staten, do you know the defendant, Nathan Holden?
I know him since he was a little bitty baby when he was born.
Okay. All right. And you know his family, too?
Yes, sir.
All right. Well, that's fine, sir. On the night in question, you were at home. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. Did you see the defendant that night? Did he come to your door?
Yes.
Okay. And can you tell me about what time that was and what happened?
I don't know. I reckon around about 10:15 or 10:30, he knocked at the door. I said, "Who is it?" He said, "Little Nate."
All right. And is that how you knew him, Little Nate?
Little Nate, yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
did you expect him? Did you think he was going to be stopping by or what?
No, I really didn't know because I was in the bed.
All right. Well, Mr. Staten, when you heard it was him, did you open the door and let him come in?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And what did he ask you once he came in, or what conversation did y'all have?
He said, "Kali Wally, can I use your telephone?" I said, "Yeah."
What did he say?
Kali Wally.
Is that your name?
That's my nickname, Kali Wally.
Okay. All right. And so he knew you by your nickname. Said, "Kali Wally, can I use your phone?"
Yeah.
All right. Did he say why he wanted to use your phone or what for?
No, he just said, "Can I use your phone?"
All right. Would you let him?
Yeah.
And you had a cordless phone, a house phone you let him use?
Yeah.
Were you there while he was talking to someone?
Well, I couldn't understand what he was saying, but he was, he was sitting on the couch. I was sitting over here in my chair. He used the phone. And then he just said, thank you, handed me the phone, and got up and walked out the door.
All right. Well, how did he look that evening? Was there
Well, he
anything?
didn't look like the little Nate that I knew.
Okay.
Looked like he was disturbed or something.
All right. What was his? How did he usually look to you?
Well, he usually looked, cool, calm, and collected.
Okay.
You know?
But you say he looked a little bit different that night. Do you remember what he was wearing?
No, sir.
Okay. And he didn't tell you who he had called or why he had called him?
He just used the phone and handed it back to me and left.
All right. Well, after he walked out of your house, you know where he went?
I didn't know because I didn't hear the truck crank up.
When you say
I thought he was sitting out there in the yard.
okay. When you say the truck, you knew his truck?
I knew it may have the truck made loud noise, yeah.
And again, that was about 10:15, 10:30 that evening?
10:30, something like that.
Okay. And you just went back to bed, is that right?
Yeah, I went back to bed.
Did you get back to sleep before you talked to anyone else?
Yeah, I was asleep, then I heard another knock.
All right. Do you know about what time that was?
No, I don't.
Well, who was knocking that time?
They said it was the sheriff's department. I told them quit playing at my door.
Okay. And what did they say when you told them to quit playing?
They said, this done to her, you either open the door or we're going to knock it down. I ain't want my door knocked down, so I jumped up.
All right.
Done to her, like he was scared. I didn't see nobody, his little head sticking out like this.
And it was the sheriff, Donnie Harrison, was there?
It was the sheriff, Donnie her.
At your house about an hour and a half after.
I couldn't tell you what time it was.
Okay, that's fine. Well, what did they want to talk to you about?
They asked me, where the guy that's driving the truck? I said, who? They said, Nate. I said, I don't know.
Okay. And did you tell them about what happened, about him coming over and asking to use your phone and then leaving?
Yeah, I said, he just came in and used the phone. He walked back out the door. I said, and that was it. They asked me, did he come in the house? I said, yeah, he came in the house to use the phone. Did he have a gun? I said, I ain't seen no gun.
Did they ask you what you thought he might have been up to?
Nope.
Okay. Did they ask you about when was the last time you'd seen him before that night?
Nope, I can't remember the last time I seen him.
All right. And you didn't. What you said his truck made loud noise. Did you hear him take off in his truck after he left your house?
No, that's why I thought he was still out there.
Okay.
You
All
know.
Right. Your Honor, if I may approach the State's Exhibit 71 and 72.
Yes.
Mr. Staten, I'd like to show you just a couple of pictures. That's State 71 and State 72. You recognize those photographs?
That's my house and that's his truck.
Okay. And is that how your house would have been looking on April 9th of 2014?
Yeah. Light on, door closed, me in there asleep. Yes, sir.
All right. And this picture of the truck, it's got a kind of the corner of a house there. Is that your house too? Kind of the edge of it?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. And in looking at that truck, you believe that's the defendant's truck?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Now, if I might just walk these in front of the jury to show them. You don't need to get down, Mr. Staten. I appreciate
Yes, sir.
it. And so again, this is the front of your house.
If you could move to admit them.
I'm sorry, I moved to admit 71 and 72 at this time.
Any objection?
No, Your Honor.
All right, they're allowed.
Now, you said his truck made a lot of noise, is that right?
Yeah, I had dual exhaust.
Dual exhaust?
Yeah.
Okay. Did you hear it drive up?
I was asleep.
Okay. But you did not hear it.
I know how it sounds.
You know about the sound.
Yeah.
Okay. And so you thought he might have just been sitting out in front of your house because you never heard the truck pull off. Is that
No,
right?
I just heard him knock at the door.
Okay.
No, I ain't hear the truck pull off, no.
All right. And you didn't see a gun that night. Is that right?
Correct.
Okay. And he didn't talk to you about anything that might have happened that night.
No.
Okay. Did any other sheriffs ever come and talk to you again about this?
To my afterward.
Yes, sir. To your house?
You talking about after Donna Harris them came?
Yes, sir.
Nobody else came back to me and talked about it.
Okay. All right, Mr. Staten, I really appreciate you coming down here and talking to us. I don't have any further questions.
All right.
Cross-examination?
Yes, sir. Hello, Mr. Staten.
Boy.
So you've known Nate Holden since he was a child, you said, is that right?
Yeah.
You're a friend of his family,
Yeah.
and y'all have socialized together,
Yeah.
attended cookouts together,
Yep.
anything else?
Huh?
Any other types of gatherings you've attended together?
We just sit over at Daddy's house playing cards and stuff, playing tonk for money. Mm-hmm. I was losing.
So you've had an opportunity to get to know Mr. Holden a little bit, right?
Oh, yeah.
Have you ever seen him act in any sort of violent way?
No, never.
What'd you think when you heard he was charged with these crimes?
Objection.
You don't answer that, sir. Sustained.
You were surprised when you heard he was charged with this, weren't you?
Objection.
Sustained.
Oh, no, y'all
You don't
carrying
need to
me
answer
too
that, sir.
quick.
You don't need to answer.
Okay.
No further questions.
All right. Anything further?
No, sir.
All right. Thank you, sir. You may step down.
I may roll out.
Yes, sir. So is Mr. Waller, were you questioning Ms. Suhall? Is
Yeah,
that
yes,
next?
Your Honor.
All right, so if we could have Ms. Suhall return.
Yes, sir.
Very good. Mr. Waller? So I believe there was an objection right before we recessed, and that objection sustained.
Thank you, Your Honor. Ms. Suhall, when we broke, we were talking about that LaTanya had just found out about the emergency custody order that the defendant had filed, and her kids had been taken from her. Is that right?
Yes, sir.
And I think one of the last things you said is LaTanya was upset about that.
Correct.
Okay. Well, let me ask you, Ms. Suhall, did you continue to maintain contact with LaTanya after January 30th and when that order was in place?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And while she was upset about the order, did she respect the order and leave the kids there with the defendant
She did.
based on the court order?
Yes, sir.
Okay. All right. Let's I do want to move on to February 10th of 2014, and that's I believe we heard testimony yesterday. That was the hearing that was in response to the defendant filing the emergency custody order.
Yes, sir.
Okay. And on February 10th of 2014, were you present there in the courtroom when the judge decided that case?
Yes, sir.
And as a result of that case, what was the custody arrangement to be?
I didn't stay for the entire hearing, but Ms. Holden called me the next day to tell me what the results were.
And what was the result of that, ma'am?
She said that Judge Denning gave her the girls and Jeremy to Mr. Holden. She also sent me a draft of the court order. She said every other weekend, all 3 children are with her. The opposite weekend, they're with their father. I asked her if she was okay with that decision, and she said she was.
And you know, when you say that she appeared to be okay with that decision, did you have any further conversation with her about that?
No, I don't believe so, other than to say that I would make sure that the schools got a copy of the order.
And if I may approach the clerk, Your Honor.
Yes.
And Ms. Suhall, you said you received a copy of that order as well.
Yes, sir.
Ms. Suhall, I'm going to approach you with what has previously been introduced to the evidence as State's Exhibit 54, and tell me if you recognize that as the temporary order that you reviewed.
Yes, sir. I believe it is.
And specifically, if you'll flip to the final page of that document. Those are some of the orders. I'm sorry, page 4 of that document. You were in the right place. If I may borrow that.
Yes,
from
sir.
you. Page 3 and then going on to page 4 is the orders of the court that announce that custody situation. Is that right?
Yes, sir.
And that's the arrangement that you just described, in which Latanya had the girls during the week, and the defendant had his son, and then they switched off on the weekends.
Yes, sir.
Number 6 of that order, can you read number 6 of that order?
The plaintiff, defendant, and maternal grandparents shall have no weapons in the residence where the minor children are residing.
And in that order, were you present in court, and did you in fact testify in that hearing?
I did. Excuse me. Check my notes. I did. I'm sorry, I did.
And during your testimony, did you alert the court to the fact that you had gone over that safety plan that you talked about earlier and asked Mr. Taylor to remove all the guns from his house?
Yes.
And as a result of that, did you have a conversation with Mr. Taylor to see whether or not he had removed all weapons or guns from his house?
I spoke to him before the hearing actually started, and he informed me he had removed all the guns from his property and given them to a neighbor for safekeeping.
Okay. So he didn't just put them in a kind of a locked cabinet there in his house. He gave them to a neighbor or someone else for safekeeping.
Correct.
And I think you testified earlier that you would have been just fine if he had everything locked up in a cabinet, but he went a step further.
That's correct.
Okay. And would the defendant, or do you know if the defendant was present for that hearing on this day when the order was made? Was he in court?
He was in court. He arrived late.
Thank you, Ms. Suhall.
Yes, sir.
Now, Ms. Suhall, after this hearing, I think you said you had to leave early, but Latanya let you know what the situation was in terms of the order.
Yes, sir.
Okay. And what happened to your involvement in the case after February 10th of 2014?
The case was staffed with my supervisor, and it was determined that the family was in need of services. And what that means is that, if you recall, I explained at the beginning that the next step is that the case would go to in-home services, which means that the family would be monitored, and perhaps classes or certain things need to be done to make sure that the children continue to be safe. So the case was transferred to a coworker named Lorna Haddix, and was transferred on February 17th of 2014.
Ms. Suhall, do you know what type of further assistance was required for the family, and the reason, I guess, why it was transferred?
The reason why it was transferred is because of the domestic violence between Mr. Holden and Miss Allen, resulting in the filing of a DVPO. That Jeremy had been beaten by his father with a broom handle, which was broken. That Jeremy, who was having continued problems in terms of his emotional health with going back and forth with his father. So it's actually called in need of services, that they really could use some help in trying to get through this transition period in their life. So that's what happened.
Was there any specific recommendation as to treatment or help that you recommended at that time, or was that for Miss Haddix to kind of develop with the family?
It seems like there was, but I don't have that. I'm sorry, I do have that. I made some recommendations, yes. And then it was her responsibility to follow up with that.
And what were your recommendations?
That Mr. Holden have a substance abuse assessment and participate in any and all recommended treatment. That domestic violence treatment be put in place for both parents, and parenting education for Mr. Holden.
And did you notify Miss LaTanya about these recommendations and the fact that the case was being transferred to someone else?
Yes, I contacted her on February 18th to tell her.
And was she accepting of that and willing to abide by your recommendations?
She was.
How about, did you did you contact Mr. Holden and advise him of your recommendations and how the case would proceed?
I did that same day.
And what was his response?
He was not as receptive.
What did he tell you?
I explained that the case would be going to in-home services and what that meant, and it would make it much easier if he would just go ahead and agree to submit to a substance abuse assessment. And he wanted to know why he would submit to one if he had no problems. I told him that many of our clients say they have no problems, and that this was a way to determine whether or not that was true. And he said that he would refuse to submit to that assessment. I told him who his new worker would be, and asked him where he and Jeremy were staying, because at the time I don't believe that he was staying at the Stag Trail address, but he said he was staying there, but he planned on moving. In that I told him, well, we would need to know where he was moving to, especially if Jeremy changed schools. He said that he would not allow us to see his children at school. And at the time, it initially, now that I recall, it was initially transferred to a coworker named Bernadette Wake. And I'm not sure why it transferred from Bernadette to Larna. I wasn't in the office during that time. But eventually Miss Larna Haddix got it, and they took over from there.
So on February 18th, you essentially closed out your aspect of the case?
Yes, sir.
Okay. But CPS itself was still involved with the family at that point?
Correct.
Okay. And Ms. Suhall, when you closed out your case, did you have any concerns about the safety of the children while they were residing with LaTanya and her parents?
No.
Did you have concerns about Jeremy and the girls when they were residing with the defendant?
I continue to have some concerns about Jeremy because he was struggling. The girls seemed kind of oblivious to what was going on, so I wasn't as concerned about them.
May I have just a moment? Your Honor?
Yes.
This time, sir.
Cross-examination.
Yes, sir. Ms. Suhall, you said that throughout the time that you were talking and working with Jeremy, he said that he wanted to live with his dad. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
And early on in the case, in the first day, you talked with LaTanya, and she talked about the fact that before the protective order was in place, there was no custody agreement in effect. Was that correct?
Correct.
And therefore, there was no court order about who had control of the kids, who had
Correct.
custody of the kids. And she talked about the fact that her father had fussed at Nate when he said he wanted to pick up the kids. Is that correct?
I don't believe she told me that,
You remember writing that in your report?
that her father fussed at
At
Nathan.
Nate. Yes.
If you can show me where it is, I don't really recall it.
Okay. If you could, and I have, if I could approach.
Yes.
Okay, well, let me rephrase it. That Nate had fussed at her father. Is that, do you remember that?
When he, yes.
Yes.
That I do.
And you remember that she told you that her father said that if he came on the property, he would shoot him?
Yes.
Okay. You talked about in reports, you reported some of the things that Ms. Allen told you about what her brother had said,
Correct.
but you never talked at this time with Sylvester Jr.
Correct.
about that. And in part of, in your assessment, did LaTanya tell you that her father had a temper?
She did not.
She didn't tell you that?
No, sir.
That he suffered from PTSD?
No, sir.
Okay.
Objection.
There was testimony, she testified to that in her direct examination, and I'm just asking about what she found out that information.
All right. It's overruled.
And you were aware that while she was living with her parents' house, Sylvester Sr. would be living there as well?
Correct.
And talk a little bit about the incident that happened on January 26. Ask you some questions about that. Were you aware that the person who made the call to the police officers was Jeremy?
If you can hang on one second.
Sure. And if you need some time, I realize that you're relying, assume that you're relying because this happened a few years on the report that you did.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Okay. I'm sorry, can you state your question again?
That the person who called the sheriff's deputy was Jeremy himself.
I believe Jeremy told me that he had called the sheriff,
Okay.
or called 911, I'm sorry.
And you remember that his, and I'm looking for your help, I'm looking at the January 27th, 2014 school visit
Yes, sir.
notes. And in that, they said that once they got to the grandfather's house, you talked with Jeremy about what happened, correct?
Sir.
Okay. And he said that once he got to the grandfather's house, his grandfather told the girls to go inside the house,
Yes.
and he told Jeremy to stay in the car.
Yes, sir.
He said that his grandfather grabbed his phone and slapped him.
Yes, sir.
Okay, that's saying. And he said, "You set me up."
Yes, sir.
He actually said, "You set me up, nigger."
Yes, sir.
Over and over again.
Yes, sir.
Jeremy also said that while he sat in the car, his grandfather called a couple of people and said, "Your buddy set me up."
Yes, sir.
Okay. Jeremy said he didn't know who his grandfather was talking to and what that meant.
Correct.
He said he kept cussing at him, but Jeremy finally got out of the car and went into the house to get his house phone.
Yes, sir.
He said he was trying to call his dad to tell him what happened
Yes, sir.
because his dad told him to call if anything went wrong.
Yes, sir.
And he said he called the police and went outside.
Yes, sir.
And then he said when he was outside, my grandfather came out with a gun
Yes, sir.
and a belt.
Yes, sir.
Okay. He said he thought his grandfather had anger issues.
Yes, sir.
Okay. And you testified at this hearing about what Jeremy told you.
Yes, sir.
And present at the hearing was Latanya.
In which hearing are you referring to?
This is the one that I believe was the February 10th hearing. The hearing that happened after this.
I think that was the February 10th hearing. Yes, sir.
You testified.
Briefly.
You testified briefly, but you recounted Jeremy's version of events, correct?
Yes, sir.
And you and Nate Holden was present at that hearing as well.
Yes, sir.
Okay. And you talked with Mr. Holden on January 27th, didn't you? I think it's listed as 12714 TC to Mr. Holden.
Yes, sir.
Okay. And he recounted the same story that Jeremy had told you?
Basically, yes.
Okay. He was upset.
Well, let me back up. He accounted what happened at the exchange, not what happened when Jeremy got home. If I'm referring to the same paragraph.
There's about midway through you reflect.
Oh, I'm sorry. You're right. You're right. He did talk about that. Yes, sir.
Okay, he said essentially the same thing.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Excuse me.
And then there's a paragraph right below that you wrote in your notes, there was absolutely no convincing Mr. Holden that I needed more time to look into the matter to determine if Jeremy is in actual danger.
That's correct.
Mr. Holden would not listen.
Correct.
I finally told him if he was concerned about Jeremy's safety, he could take out an emergency custody order,
Correct.
which is what Mr. Holden did.
Yes.
And you met with with Sylvester Taylor,
I did.
and he did show you that he had a gun in his car.
He did.
He also showed you that he had guns in the shed in the back
Correct.
of the yard.
Yes, sir.
He told you before the hearing that he'd gotten rid of the guns. Before the court hearing of February 10th. I'm sorry.
That morning he did,
Okay.
yes.
He did.
Yes, sir.
But as of the time of the hearing, you had not searched the house to see if that was true.
I'm not allowed to search houses.
Okay. So and as far as you know, nobody else had confirmed whether that was true or not.
Correct.
Okay. And you testified at the hearing that you did not search the house. As you
I
said,
did not testify to that. No, sir.
you didn't say in the hearing that you were told that, but did
I
not
was
search.
told that.
Okay.
Mr. Taylor had told me that.
Okay.
I did not say that I had not searched the house. I was never asked if I searched the house.
Okay. But you certainly didn't say that you had searched the house.
I'm sorry?
You certainly didn't say that you had searched the house. You certainly didn't say, I searched the house and this was true.
No, because I hadn't.
Okay. I may have a second. You had several visits with Jeremy in these couple of months, correct?
Yes, sir.
And you said he was a conflicted kid,
Yes,
but it was definitely true that he loved his mother very much
very much.
and he loved his father very much.
He did.
Thank you. I have no further questions.
Redirect.
Yes, sir. What was that?
72.
At 72, you testified earlier that you, what number is it?
73.
73. Excuse me. You testified earlier that you requested the report from the Wake County Sheriff's Office about the January 26th incident between JT and his grandfather, is that right?
Yes, sir.
And State's Exhibit number 73, does that appear to be the same report that you reviewed in regards to this incident?
It is.
And that's the report that you looked at after you spoke with LaTanya and the family about the incident, is that right?
That's correct.
And in reviewing that report, both from your memory and looking at the report itself, was there ever a mention by JT of a gun involved in that?
There was not.
And in regards to who actually called 911, did Mr. Taylor tell you that he had called 911 as well?
I believe he did, yes.
And JT said he called 911 as well.
Correct.
And in reviewing that report, does it appear that it says Jeremy Taylor also called 911? Is the word also in there?
Yes, sir.
So from that report and from what you have learned from talking to the people, it sounds like both of them in fact called 911.
Yes, sir.
Thank you, Ms. Suhall. I don't have any further questions.
Recross.
Just briefly, were Were you also aware that Jeremy talked about the incident with his guidance counselors?
I don't believe I was.
Okay, all right, thank you. No further questions.
Thank you, ma'am. You may step down.
Yes, sir.
Just a moment.
Yeah.
All right, this time the state would call Sergeant Welch to the stand.
And if you would, place your left hand on the Bible and raise your right. Do you solemnly swear the testimony you give to be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
Mr. Waller?
Thank you. Sergeant Welch, good afternoon to you, ma'am.
Good afternoon.
Will you please state your name for the record?
Sergeant Marie Welch.
And Sergeant Welch, how are you employed, ma'am?
I'm a sergeant with the Wake County Sheriff's Office.
And how long have you been with the Wake County Sheriff's Office?
I'm 17 and a half years.
When did you become a sergeant?
January 2010.
Of 2010?
Yes, sir.
And what division are you a sergeant over?
I'm currently in the CID division,
What does CID mean?
Criminal Investigative Division.
Back in, on January 2nd of 2014, were you a sergeant with the Wake County Sheriff's Office at that point?
Yes, sir.
What division were you a sergeant over on January 2nd of 2014?
I believe it's the Judicial Division, Civil Process Area.
And just generally, what does the Civil Processing Division do?
Serve civil papers, subpoenas, civil summons, that type of thing.
Where is that office located?
Next door in the Public Safety Center.
And so when you say next door, we're in the Wake County Justice Center now, and that is the building that is directly beside us,
Yes, sir.
on the same side of the street.
Yes, sir.
And where is that civil processing office in the Public Safety Center?
It's located on the first floor when you go into the lobby to the left.
So it's direct. If you walk in the front doors, it's directly to your left.
Yes, sir.
Don't have to go up any stairs, elevator, anything like that.
No.
Okay. And Sergeant Welch, in that civil processing division, do you deal with criminal matters on a regular basis in terms of investigation or anything like that?
Not normally.
On January 2nd of 2014, do you recall having the opportunity to have contact with the victim in this case, Miss LaTanya Allen?
Yes, I do.
Can you tell the members of the jury a little bit about the contact that you had with her on January 2nd of 2014?
From what I recall, I remember her coming into the civil division area and speaking with one of the employees up front. I was called up front to speak with her. I could tell she was upset. She told me that she was here to conduct some type of business in the courthouse, but her husband was outside following her, and she was scared of him.
And when you say she was upset, can you describe kind of what her physical appearance was, or tone of voice, that kind of thing?
I don't recall.
But you remember?
I clearly remember her being upset because I took her back into our muster room area, which is not a normal area where the public would be allowed.
That's an area that would be reserved for members of your office.
Yes, sir.
And Sergeant Welch, when you came into contact with LaTanya, did you see anyone following her at that point? Was there a male coming into the office with her?
No, sir.
And she told you a little bit about she was there to do some type of
From
paperwork.
what I recall, I cannot recall any specific conversation, but I do remember her stating that was her purpose for being downtown.
And how long after you began speaking with her did you decide it was necessary for you to take her into the muster room?
Almost immediately.
And when you got her back there in kind of a more a private setting, did she continue to be upset?
Yes, sir.
What did you do, Sergeant Welch, to kind of help with her concerns?
I just briefly spoke with her, and then I called one of our victim services assistant deputies that was located across the street in the courthouse, and asked her to come across the street and assist Miss Holden.
Was this a deputy that was under your supervision, or just someone that you knew had that responsibility?
I believe at the time she was under my supervision.
And you said she was a victim advocate type person?
Yes.
Or, okay. And did someone come across the street and help out?
Yes, Deputy Arnia Bell.
And did you stay with Miss Latanya as long as she was there in the muster room at your office?
I believe so.
And do you recall approximately how long she was there before Deputy Bell came?
I do not recall. I don't believe it was very long at all, maybe 5-10 minutes at the most.
And did Miss Latanya, did she continue to be upset while she was there in your presence?
From what I recall, yes.
At any point, Sergeant Welch, did you go outside and look and see if her husband or this person that she said was following her was out there?
I did not.
And at any point, did anyone come in looking for her?
Not that I recall.
Besides Deputy Bell?
No, sir.
And then when Deputy Bell arrived there, did you turn Latanya over to Deputy Bell?
I did.
Thank you, Sergeant Welch. I don't have any further questions, Your Honor.
No question.
Thank you, ma'am. You may step down.
On the state, we call Miss, former Deputy Arena Bell to the stand. Were you employed back on January 2nd of 2014?
I was a master deputy sheriff with the sheriff office working victim services unit.
And are you still a deputy?
I'm retired.
Okay, congratulations.
Thank you.
When did you retire?
November 30th of this year.
Of
Last year, I'm sorry.
2016. Okay. And Ms. Bell, can you describe for us a little bit about what your duties and responsibilities were as a deputy with victim services?
If someone comes in and want to take out a protection order, normally ask them what the relationship is. Then I'll assist them going to the clerk's office, which is located on the same floor in the clerk's office, to start the process of filling out a protection order.
And where was your office located, Ms. Bell?
The 5th floor of the old Wake County Courthouse.
Okay, so the courthouse across the street from this one.
Yes, sir.
Okay. And Deputy Bell, when you were doing your job, are you doing any type of investigation at that point, or are you just helping with the paperwork?
Pretty much the paperwork.
Maybe listen to what they have to say, but you essentially point them in the right direction of where to go to file the proper paperwork.
At first, yeah, they come to me. Technically, I'm the last person they come to once they take the order out.
Okay. All right. Well, let me turn your attention back to January 2nd of 2014. Were you on duty, duly sworn, and so employed as a deputy with the Wake County Sheriff's Office on January 2nd?
I was.
And, ma'am, did you have the opportunity to come into contact with Latanya Allen on that day?
I did.
Can you tell us a little bit about how you came into contact with Latanya on that day?
I received a call from Sergeant Welch that I need to come over to the Public Safety Center to speak with someone about an order.
Did it take you long to get over there after you received that call from Sergeant Welch?
No.
Okay. Did you go immediately?
I did.
And when you got that call from Sergeant Welch, where did you go?
Came into the muster room in the Public Safety Center, which is across the street from where I was located.
What's a muster room?
It is I guess, a room that they use for where all the other deputies come in. If they have paperwork, they come pick up their paperwork before they go out to serve papers.
A work room.
Yes.
And when you got there to the muster room, who did you find?
Sergeant Welch and Latanya Holden.
And can you describe kind of what you saw there when you got into the workroom?
She was actually sitting down, kind of with her head down. When I walked in,
And when you say she, or
Latanya.
you referring to Latanya? Okay.
and Sergeant Welch said that pretty much you need to talk to her. And I introduced myself to her and asked her, how could I assist her?
And what did Latanya tell you at that point?
That she needed to take out a protection order against her husband.
Did she tell you any about what was going on that day and how she ended up in that muster room?
I think I asked her, how did she end up over there opposed to coming to where people normally take the paperwork out? And she stated that her husband had been following her, and she just jumped out of her car, left in the middle of the street, and ran into the sheriff's office for help.
And when you heard that, Deputy Bell, had you noticed anybody out there in the street looking for anyone when you came across the street?
I did not, because I didn't know what the situation was at the time.
And what did Latanya tell you anything else about the situation when you found her there?
No, then I just asked her I let her know that we had to go back across the street. I asked her what type of vehicle was he driving, and I just kind of went out and made sure that I didn't see that vehicle, and then we proceeded across the street.
Do you recall what type of vehicle she described to you?
I don't. Mm-mm.
But whatever vehicle was, you went and looked for
Right.
it and didn't find it.
I did not.
Now, Deputy Bell, when you saw Latanya there in the muster room, what was her demeanor like at that point?
She was nervous, like shaking a little, just noticeably upset.
After you checked the area for the vehicle, were you able to in fact get Latanya across the street to do the paperwork?
I was.
And was she able to walk through the process and complete that paperwork on that day?
She did.
Anything unusual happen in terms of completing the paperwork there that afternoon?
Not to my knowledge, no.
And you said that you're kind of in the last phase of
Yes.
when someone gets a DVPO, that it then comes to you, and then what do you do with it, ma'am?
Actually, explain to them what the process it is that we do. Ask them if they have any questions about the service. Then, if they say no, then I go ahead and get it put in the system and get it ready, process for the deputies to come in and pick it up to be served.
And when you say service, what do you mean by service of a DVPO?
For the deputy to actually go out to the residents to serve the paper on whoever name is on the paper to be served.
So once someone like Latanya generates that paperwork and it gets approved, then it would be you and your office that then goes and takes it to the person to be served.
I don't do it anymore, but the deputy comes and pick it up from me, and then they will actually go out and serve it.
And is that what you did with Latanya's order that day as well? Put it in the process to be served?
Yes, sir.
Thank you, Ms. Bell.
Cross-examination? No, you're not. All right. Thank you, ma'am.
Investigator Darus to the stand.
Here's a few more. Mr. Staten couldn't do these. These are already in.
Okay. I've got it.
Would place your left hand on the Bible and raise your right. Do you solemnly swear the testimony you give to be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I swear. Mr. Waller. Thank you, sir. Investigator Darus, good morning, or excuse me, good afternoon to you.
Good afternoon.
Can you please state your name for the record?
Stan Darus.
And how are you employed, sir?
I'm an investigator with Wake County Sheriff's Office.
How long have you been with the Wake County Sheriff's Office?
I started with Wake County Sheriff's Office in 2003. I was promoted to investigator in 2004, and I've been in that capacity since then.
And as an investigator with the Wake County Sheriff's Department, what are your general duties and responsibilities?
My first 7 years as investigations, I was assigned to property division. We investigate home break-ins, larcenies, things of that nature. I was then moved to the juvenile division, where I stayed approximately 5 years. We mostly investigate crimes against juveniles, mostly sex crimes. And then most recently, in January of this year, I was moved to the person crimes division.
And so in 2014, which division were you assigned to?
Juvenile.
Juvenile. And sir, as investigators, do you sometimes help out in different areas of that Wake County Sheriff's Department may be investigating?
Absolutely. When we're in our on-call status, there's usually 5 to 7 investigators that work a second shift, and anything that comes out of a serious nature during that on-call period, we're tasked to go and help out.
Investigator Darus, I want to turn your attention back to April, I guess 9th and 10th of 2014. Were you on duty, duly sworn, and so employed as a Wake County Sheriff's deputy at that time?
I was.
And sir, did you have the opportunity to come involved in the investigation of the Nathan Holden and Taylor case?
I did.
What was your responsibility in regard to this investigation, sir?
When I first received a call, I was actually on an interview in Wake Forest. I was notified that this call had gone out, and I told them that I would be en route as soon as I could finish up my interview. Prior to finishing my interview, I was called by a sergeant and asked to respond downtown to write the search warrant to search the residence.
And which residence did you write the search warrant for?
The Lake Glad Road residence.
1125.
1125.
And that's the residence we've been speaking about of Sylvester and Anglia Taylor.
Yes, sir.
In Latanya. Okay. And were you able to prepare those search warrants?
I did.
After preparing the search warrants, did you have another duty assigned to you on this night?
I did. Once I delivered the search warrant to the scene, I handed it over to Sergeant Lilyquist. I was then asked to respond to interview Mr. Staten.
And what time did you arrive to interview Mr. Staten?
I have April 10th at 0059 hours.
Okay, so it's now obviously we've gone from the late night hours of April 9th until the early morning hours of April 10th.
Yes, sir.
And where did you respond?
I responded to 6800 Nightdale Eagle Rock Road.
Can you give us a general idea of where that is in the county?
I believe it's a Wendell address. It's kind of between Wendell and Nightdale. It's approximately 3 to 4 miles from the Lake Glad Road address.
And Mr. Staten testified earlier that Sheriff Harrison was out there came to his house. Was the sheriff still there when you arrived?
He was not.
Okay. And did you have the opportunity to interview Mr. Staten there that night at his house?
I did.
Okay. And did you decide not to transport him downtown?
Yeah. I was just asked to go there and interview him to see what kind of. We're still at that point trying to locate the suspect, and we're also trying to figure out kind of the chain of events that led to this.
And was Mr. Staten cooperative with you that night and give you a statement as to what he recalled?
He was.
Okay. Can you tell the members of the jury what Mr. Staten told you that night?
He had told me that he was home alone and he had heard a vehicle drive up. He told me he heard a knock on the door. I asked him what time this occurred. He said approximately 10:45 p.m. He said he asked who was at the door, and a voice said, "Little Nate."
So members of the jury, again, this information is being provided solely for the purposes of corroborating or impeaching a witness who's already testified, as you may so find. It's not to be considered for the truth of the matter being asserted because it's out-of-court statements that are being testified to here. Go ahead, sir.
I asked him who Little Nate was. He said that he's known Little Nate Carroll his entire life. He said that Nate asked if he could use his phone. He told him he could. He came inside his residence and he let him use his cordless house phone. He said he made a call and asked the person on the line to come get him. He said the person must have asked where he was because Nate said at like brother's house.
Yeah. And did you ask Mr. Staten who like is?
I did.
And what did he respond?
Objection, Your Honor, that's outside of, it's not corroboration.
I mean, like,
I'm going to allow it for impeachment purposes as well as corroboration.
When I asked him who like was, he said that was his brother.
And when you say his brother, it was Mr. Staten referring to his brother?
Yes.
Okay, so Mr. Staten's brother was like, or
Yes.
is like.
Yes, sir. He said he then hung up the phone and thanked him and walked out the front door.
What else did Mr. Staten tell you?
He said he went back to bed at that time. He said the next thing he knew, he heard a knock at the door. He asked who it was, and a voice said, "Sheriff Harrison." He said the sheriff asked him some questions about what happened at the residence. He said he answered all the sheriff's questions. I asked him how much time passed between Nate making the call and someone arriving to pick him up. He said about 5 minutes or so. He said that he heard a car come up, but he did not look out the window to see who it was. I asked him how Nate looked this evening compared to how he normally looked. He said that he was always been real clean looking, but tonight he looked nervous and nasty looking. And I have nasty in quotations, so that's the exact word that he used. He said he later looked outside and saw that the truck was still there. He thought maybe...
Objection.
All right, sustain. Well, I don't know what, if it's just simply a mental impression.
I'm not sure what the...
I mean, are you, that the truck was still there or what he thought?
There's matters that we'd argue be irrelevant and not testify to at this witness.
All right.
I
May I see a copy of the report?
I can... Yes, sir.
Thank you.
So he told you that... He said he later looked outside and his truck was still there.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Did Mr. Staten tell you where he thinks Mr. Holden, the defendant, lives?
He did. He said he thinks he lives on Riley Hill Road somewhere.
Okay. All right. And after you spoke with Mr. Staten, he told you the truck was still outside. Did you go outside and take a look at the truck?
When I arrived, there were, as I recall, 3 or 4 deputies already on scene. The sergeants were already handling what they were doing with that vehicle. I don't recall ever looking inside the vehicle, but I observed it at the location.
has previously been introduced to States Exhibit 71 and 72. Do you recognize those two photographs?
Yes, sir.
What are those two photographs of, starting with 71?
That's a picture of the front of the residence at 6800 Nightdale Eagle Rock Road. And the second one is kind of the side yard of that same residence with a Chevy truck parked in the yard.
And then what I've now marked for identification purposes is States Exhibit 74. Can you identify that photograph?
It appears to be the same vehicle,
Just from
a different angle.
And then 75, can you identify that vehicle? Or photograph, excuse me.
That one's kind of dark, but it appears to be the same vehicle.
The tone on it's pretty dark, but it
Yes.
appears to be the same vehicle. Fair and accurate depiction of the truck that you saw there that night.
Yes, sir.
Your Honor, this time I would ask to introduce States Exhibits 74 and 75 into evidence for illustrative purposes.
Any objection?
Okay.
They're allowed.
And permission to publish using the overhead projector.
Yes, sir. I don't have your image
Don't have
on
me
my
yet.
screen.
No. All right. Investigator Darus, this is States Exhibit number 71. Does that appear to be the house that you went to that night?
It does.
And that's where you interviewed Mr. Staten?
I actually interviewed him in my car, I believe, but yes, sir.
States Exhibit number 72. Strike that. That's States Exhibit number 75, I believe. That's the photograph. I think you said it was a little bit dark, but is that the photograph
Yes, sir.
that you said depicts where the truck was that night?
Yes, sir.
And then this is States Exhibit number 74, just a different angle of where the truck was that night.
Yes, sir.
And to your knowledge, sir, at any point while the Wake County Sheriff's deputies were on scene there, was that truck moved at any time from the position that you see it in now?
Not to my knowledge, no, sir.
Thank you, Investigator Darus. I don't have any further questions at this time, Your Honor.
Cross-examination.
No questions.
Please recall all the instructions and rules. Leave your notepads in your chairs, please. And gather at 5 minutes till 4 in the deliberation room. Everyone else, please remain seated.